everybody. Good evening, everybody. Good night, whatever. Can you all hear me okay? Hi, Ludovico. Hi, Anita. I can't scroll up and see anymore. Oh, who else is here? Of course, I can. Hi, Saman. What are you? Wait, shouldn't you be reading tonight? Oh, it's me. It's me tonight, everybody. And it's a long one. This story is 13 pages long. Now, I know why Saman said this morning, no, I'll do tomorrow, you do tonight. So Saman is on tomorrow night. I am going to get straight into it. I hope you've all had a wonderful day today. And I hope you all really, really enjoyed Robert Pym's reading last night. If you haven't listened to it yet, do feel free to go and listen to Robert's reading from last night. We did unfortunately have a couple of what do you call it? When you don't have a good reception. Anyway, it fell out a couple of times, but we sorted it out in the end. He went into another room where the walls weren't so thick, because where he lives has very thick and old walls. So then it sorted out, and it was a very funny and very lovely reading. So do go again and listen to Robert Pym last night. And if you want something for your children, I read something from Winnie the Pooh yesterday and something from a writer called Clarice Bean Spells Trouble. So that was fun for the kids last night if you want to listen to that. Tonight, however, we are on our Tales of 1001 Arabian Nights, and I hope I didn't pick the wrong night. We are on the 22nd night of 1001 Arabian Nights. I still wave back at the screen. I'm waving at you too, Anita. Oh, hi, Victoria. So lovely to see you here. Yes, Saman, it's good for you to love. 13 pages. 13. Okay, you owe me one for this. Okay, well, I am fortified with water, with tea, with smelly stuff, with wine. The music at the beginning, by the way, was entitled Rumi, or Love Thoughts, or something like that, or Love Nights. And it was Sufi meditation music, apparently. So here we go. Now, when it was the 22nd night. Oh, and by the way, just to recap very quickly, there were two brothers. They had a fight. One went off and left Cairo. They both became wazirs. They both ended up having children. The older brother has died, and he had a son, and the younger brother had a daughter, and the Sheikh of Basra wants to marry the daughter, but the younger brother has said that he cannot because he has to marry his daughter and a promise to his older brother, who has since passed away. And the Sheikh is in absolute horror and disgust at this idea, and has now said he's going to marry off the daughter to a hunchback. So this is where we are right now in our tale. Scheherazade said, "It has reached me, O auspicious king, that when the genie narrated to the Jinniyah how the king had caused the wedding contract to be drawn up between the hunchbacked groom and the lovely young lady who was heartbroken for sorrow, and how she was the fairest of created things and even more beautiful than this youth, the Jinniyah cried out at him, 'Thou liest, this youth is handsomer than any one of his day.' The Ifrit gave her the lie again, adding, 'By Allah, O my sister, the damsel I speak of is fairer than this, yet none but he deserveth her, for they resemble each other like brother and sister, or at least cousins. And well away how she is wasted upon that hunchback.' Then said she, 'O my brother, let us get under him and lift him up and carry him to Cairo. Then we may compare him with the damsel of whom thou speakest. So determine whether of the twain is the fairer. To hear is to obey, replied he. Thou speakest to the point, nor is there rightier recking than this of thine, and myself will carry him. So he raised him from the ground, and flew with him like a bird soaring in upper air, the Ifritah keeping close by his side at equal speed, till he alighted with him in the city of Cairo, and set him down on a stone bench, and woke him up. He roused himself, and finding that he was no longer at his father's tomb in Basra city, he looked right and left, and saw that he was in a strange place, and he would have cried out, but the Ifrit gave him a cuff, which persuaded him into silence. Then he brought him rich raiment and clothed him therein, and giving him a lighted flambeau, said, Know that I have brought thee hither, meaning to do thee a good turn for the love of Allah. So take this torch, and mingle with the people of the Hammam door, and walk on with them, without stopping till thou reach the house of the wedding festival. Then go boldly forward, and enter the great saloon, and fear none, but take thy stand at the right hand of the hunchback bridegroom. And as often as any of the nurses or tirewomen or singing girls come up to thee, put thy hand into thy pocket, and which thou wilt find filled with gold. Then take it out and throw to them, and spare not. For as often as thou thrustest fingers into the pouch, thou shalt find it full of coin. Give largesse by handsful, and fear nothing, but set thy trust upon him who created thee. For this is not by thine own strength, but by that of Allah Almighty, that his decrees may take effect upon his creatures. When Badr al-Din Hasan heard these words from the Ifrit, he said to himself, Would heaven I knew what all this means, and what is the cause of such kindness. However, he mingled with the people and, lighting his flambeau, moved on with the bridal procession till he came to the bath, where he found the hunchback already on horseback. Then he pushed his way in among the crowd, a veritable beauty of a man in the finest apparel, wearing tarbush and turband, and a long-sleeved robe purfled with gold, and, as often as the singing women stopped for the people to give them largesse, he thrust his hand into his pocket, and finding it full of gold, took out a handful, and threw it on the tambourine, till he had filled it with gold pieces for the music girls and the tirewomen. The singers were amazed by his bounty, and people marvelled at his beauty and loveliness and the splendour of his dress. He ceased not to do this till he reached the mansion of the wazir, who was his uncle, where the chamberlains drove back the people and forbade them to go forward. But the singing girls and the tirewomen said, By Allah, we will not enter unless this young man enters with us, for he hath given us length o' life with his largesse, and we will not display the bride unless he is present. Therewith they carried him into the bridal hall, and made him sit down, defying the evil glances of the hunchbacked bridegroom. The wives of the emirs and wazirs and chamberlains and courtiers, and all stood in double line, each holding a massy cierge ready lighted. All wore thin face veils, and the 2 rows right and left extended from the bride's throne to the head of the hall adjoining the chamber whence she was to come forth. When the ladies saw Badr al-Din Hassan and noted his beauty and loveliness and his face that shone like the new moon, their hearts inclined to him, and the singing girls said to all that were present, "Know that this beauty crossed our hands with naught but red gold. So be not chary to do him womanly service and comply with all he says, no matter what he ask." So all the women crowded round Hassan with their torches and gazed on his loveliness and envied him his beauty. And one and all would gladly have lain on his bosom in an hour, or rather a year. Their hearts were so troubled that they let fall their veils from before their faces and said, "Happy she who belongeth to this youth, or to whom he belongeth." And they called down the curses on the crooked groom and on him who was the cause of his marriage to the girl Beauty. And often as they blessed Badr al-Din Hassan, they damned the hunchback, saying, "Verily, this youth and none other deserveth our bride. Ah, well away for such a lovely one with his hideous Quasimodo. Allah's curse light on his head and on the Sultan who commanded the marriage." Then the singing girls, beating their tabrets and lullabilooed with joy, announcing the appearing of the bride, and the wazir's daughter came in, surrounded by her tirewomen, who made her goodly to look upon. For they had performed her, and incensed her, and adorned her hair. And they robed her in raiment and ornaments befitting the mighty Choros kings. The most notable part of her dress was a loose robe worn over her other garments. It was diapered with red gold, with figures of wild beasts and birds whose eyes and beaks were of gems, and claws of red rubies and green beryl. Her neck was graced with a necklace of Yamanti work, worth thousands of gold pieces, whose bezels were great round jewels of sorts, the like of which was never owned by Kazia or by Toba King. And the bride was as the full moon, when at fullest on the 14th night, and she paced into the hall. She was like one of the houris of heaven. Praise be to him who created her in such splendour of beauty. The ladies encompassed her as the white contains the black of eye, they clustering like stars while she shone amongst them, like the moon when it eats up the clouds. Now Badr al-Din Hassan of Basra was sitting in full gaze of the folk when the bride came forward with her graceful swaying and swimming gait, and her hunchbacked bridegroom stood up to meet and receive her. She, however, turned away from the white and walked forward till she stood before her cousin Hassan, the son of her uncle, whereat the people laughed. But when the wedding guests saw her thus attracted towards Badr al-Din, they made a mighty clamour, and the singing women shouted their loudest, whereupon he put his hand into his pocket and, pulling out a handful of gold, cast it into their tambourines, and the girls rejoiced and said, "Could we win our wish, this bride were thine." At this he smiled, and the folk came round him, flambeau in hand, rejoiced, and like the eyeball round the pupil, while the gobo bridegroom was left sitting alone, much like a tailless baboon. For every time they lighted a candle for him, it went out, willy-nilly. So he was left in darkness and silence, and looking at naught but himself. When Badr al-Din Hassan saw the bridegroom sitting lonesome in the dark, and all the wedding guests with their flambeaux and wax candles crowding about himself, he was bewildered and marvelled much. But when he looked at his cousin, the daughter of his uncle, he rejoiced and felt an inward delight. He longed to greet her and gazed intently on her face, which was radiant with light and brilliancy. Then the tirewoman took off her veil and displayed her in the first bridal dress, which was of scarlet satin, and Hassan had a view of her which dazzled his sight and dazed his wits as she moved to and fro, swaying with graceful gait, and she turned the heads of all the guests, women as well as men. Then they changed that dress and displayed her in a robe of azure, and she reappeared like the full moon when it riseth over the horizon, with her coal-black hair and cheeks delicately fair, and teeth shone in sweet smiling, and breasts firm, rising, and crowning sides of the softest waist of the roundest. And in this second suit she was as a certain master of high conceit saith of the like of her. She came apparelled in an azure vest, ultramarine, as skies are decked and dight. And I viewed the unapparelled sight, which showed my eyes a moon of summer on a winter night. Then they changed that suit for another, and veiling her face in the luxuriance of her hair, loosed her lovelocks, so dark, so long, that their darkness and length envied the darkest nights, and she shot through all hearts with the magical shaft of her eye-babes. They displayed her in the third dress, and she was, as said of her the sayer, veiling her cheeks, with hair a morn she comes, and I her mischiefs with a cloud compare, saying, Thou veilest morn with night? Ah, no. Quoth she, I shroud full moon with darkling air. Then they displayed her in the fourth bridal dress, and she came forward shining like the rising sun, and swaying to and fro with lovesome grace and supple ease like a gazelle fawn. And she clave all hearts with the arrows of her eyelashes, even as saith one who described a charmer like her, the sun of beauty, she to sight appears, and lovely coy, she mocks all loveliness. And when he fronts her favour and her smile, a morn, the son of day, in clouds must dress. Then she came forth in the fifth dress, a very light of loveliness, like a wand of the waving willow, or a gazelle of the thirsty wold. Those locks, which stung like scorpions along her cheeks, were bent, and her neck was bowed in blandishment, and her hips quivered as she went. As saith one of the poets describing her in verse, she comes, like fullest moon on a happy night, taper of waist, with shape of magic might. She hath an eye whose glances quell mankind, and ruby on her cheeks reflects her light, and veils her hips the blackness of her hair. Beware of curls that bite with viper bite. Her sides are silken soft, the while the heart near rock behind that surface lurks from sight. When the fringed curtains of her eyne she shoots, shafts which at farthest range unmarked are light. When round her neck or waist I throw my arms, her breasts repel me with their hardened height. Ah, how her beauty all excels, ah, how! That shape transcends the graceful, waving bow. Then they adorned her with her sixth toilette, a dress which was green, and now she shamed in her slender straightness the nut-brown spear. Her radiant face dimmed the brightest beams of full moon, and she outdid the bending branches in gentle movements and flexile grace. Her loveliness exalted the beauties of earth's four quarters, and she broke men's hearts by the significance of her semblance. For she was even as saith the one poet of the poets in these lines, a damsel. 'Twas the tyre's art had decked with snares and sleight, and robed in rays, as though the sun from her had borrowed light. She came before us, wondrous clad in chemisette of green, as veiled by its leafy screen pomegranate hides from sight. And when he said, "How callest thou the manner of thy dress?" she answered us in pleasant way with doubled meaning dight, "We call this garment crève-cœur, and rightly is it height. For many a heart with this we broke, and conquered many a sprite." Then they displayed her in the seventh dress, coloured between safflower and saffron, even as one of the poets saith, "In vest of saffron pale and safflower red, musked, sandaled, aber-greased, she came to front. Rise, cried her youth, go forth and show thyself. Sit, said her hips, we cannot hear the brunt. And when I craved about, her beauty said, do, do, and her pretty shame, don't, don't. Thus they displayed the bride in all her 7 toilettes before Hassan al-Basri, wholly neglecting the Gobo who sat moping alone. And when she opened her eyes, she said, O Allah, make this man my good man, and deliver me from the evil of this hunch-hacked groom. And as soon as they had made an end of this part of the ceremony, they dismissed the wedding guests who went forth, women, children, and all, and none remained save Hassan and the hunchback, whilst the tirewomen led the bride into an inner room to change her garb and gear and get her ready for the bridegroom. Excuse me while I take a sip of water. Thereupon, Quasimodo came up to Badr al-Din Hassan and said, O my lord, thou hast cheered us up this night with thy good company and overwhelmed us with thy kindness and courtesy, but now why not get thee up and go? Bismillah, he answered, in Allah's name so be it. And rising, he went forth by the door, where the Ifrit met him and said, Stay in thy stead, O Badr al-Din, and when the hunchback goes out to the closet of ease, go in without losing time and seat thyself in the alcove, and when the bride comes, say to her, 'Tis I am thy husband, for the king devised this trick, only fearing for thee and the evil eye. And he whom thou sawest is but a syce, a groom, one of our stablemen. Then walk boldly up to her and unveil her face, for jealousy hath taken us of this matter. While Hassan was still talking with the Ifrit, behold, the groom fared forth from the hall, and entering the closet of ease, sat down on the stool. Hardly hardly had he done this, when the Ilfrit came out of the tank wherein the water was in semblance of a mouse, and squeaked out, "Zeke!" Quoth the hunchback, "What ails thee?" And the mouse grew and grew until it became a coal-black cat, and caterwauled, "Meow, meow." Then it grew still more and more, till it became a dog, and barked out, "Ow, ow." When the bridegroom saw this, he was frightened, and exclaimed, "Out with thee, O unlucky one!" But the dog grew and swelled till it became an ass colt that brayed and snorted in his face, "Hawk, hawk!" Whereupon the hunchback quaked and cried, "Come to my aid, O people of the house!" But behold, the ass colt grew and became big as a buffalo, and wailed the way before him, and spake with the voice of the sons of Adam, saying, "Woe to thee, O thou bunchback, thou stinkard, O thou filthiest of grooms!" Hearing this, the groom was seized with a colic, and he sat down on the jakes in his clothes, with teeth chattering and knocking together. Quoth the Ilfrit, "Is the world so strait to see thou findest none to marry save my lady love?" But as he was silent, the Ilfrit continued, "Answer me, or I will do thee dwell in the dust." "By Allah," replied the Gobbo, "O king of the buffaloes, this is no fault of mine, for they forced me to wed her, and verily I wot not that she had a lover amongst the buffaloes. But now I repent, first before Allah, and then before thee." Said the Ilfrit to him, "I swear to thee that if thou fare forth from this place, or thou utter a word before sunrise, I assuredly will wring thy neck. When the sun rises, wend thy went, and never before return to this house." So saying, the Ilfrit took up the Gobbo bridegroom, and set him head downwards, and set his feet upwards in the slit of the privy, and said to him, "I will leave thee here, but I shall be on the lookout for thee till sunrise, and if thou stir before then, I will seize thee by thy feet and dash out thy brains against the wall. So look out for thy life." Thus far concerning the hunchback. But as regards Badr al-Din Hassan of Basra, he left the Gobbo and the Ilfrit jangling and wrangling, and going into the house, sat him down in the very middle of the alcove, and behold, in came the bride, attended by an old woman, who stood at the door and said, "O Father of uprightness, arise and take what God giveth thee." Then the old woman went away, and the bride, Sit al-Husn, or the Lady of Beauty Height, entered the inner part of the alcove, broken-hearted, and saying in herself, "By Allah, I will never yield my person to him, no, not even if he were to take my life." But as she came to the further end, she saw Badr al-Din Hassan, and she said, "Dearling, art thou still sitting here? By Allah, I was wishing that thou wert my bridegroom, or at least that thou and the hunchbacked horse-groom were partners in me." He replied, "O beautiful lady, how should the sight have access to thee, and how should he share in thee with me?" Then quoth she, "Who is my husband, thou or he?" "Sit al-Husan," rejoined Hassan, "we have not done this for mere fun, but only as a device to ward off the evil eye from thee. For when the tirewomen and the singers and the wedding guests saw thy beauty being displayed to me, they feared fascination, and thy father hired the horse-groom for 10 dinars and a porringer of meat to take the evil eye off us. And now he hath received his hire and gone his gate." When the Lady of Beauty heard these words, she smiled and rejoiced and laughed a pleasant laugh. Then she whispered him, "By the Lord, thou hast quenched a fire which tortured me, and now, by Allah, O my little dark-haired darling, take me to thee and press me to thy bosom." And then she began singing, "By Allah, set thy foot upon my soul, since long, long years for this alone I long, and whisper tale of love in ear of me. To me 'tis sweeter than the sweetest song. No other youth upon my heart shall lie, so do it often, dear, and do it long." Then she ripped off her outer gear, and she threw upon her chemise from the neck downwards, and showed her parts genital, and all the rondure of her hips. And when Badr al-Din saw the glorious sight, his desires were aroused, and he arose and doffed his clothes, and wrapping up his bag trousers, the pure gold of which he had taken from the Jew, and which contained the 1,000 dinars, he laid it under the edge of the bedding. Then he took off his turband and set it upon the settle atop his other clothes, remaining in his skull-cap and fine shirt of blue silk laced with gold. Whereupon the Lady of Beauty drew him to her, and he did likewise. Then he took her to his embrace, and set her legs around his waist, and point-blanked that cannon placed where it battereth down the bulwark of Maidenhead, and layeth it waste. And he found her a pearl unpierced, and unthridden, and a filly by all men save himself unridden. And he abated her virginity, and had joyance of her youth in his virility. And presently he withdrew his sword from sheath, and then returned to the fray right eath. And when the battle and the siege had finished, some 15th assault he had furnished, and she conceived by him that very night. Then he laid his hand under her head, and she said the same, and they embraced and fell asleep in each other's arms, as a certain poet said of such lovers in these couplets: "Visit thy lover, spurn what envy told. No envious churl shall smile on love ensouled. Merciful Allah made no fairer sight than coupled lovers' single couch doth hold. Breast pressing breast, and robed in joys their own, with pillowed forearms cast in finest mould. And when heart speaks to heart with tongue of love, folk who would part them hammered steel ice cold. If a fair friend thou find who cleaves to thee, live for that friend, and that friend in heart enfold. And ye who blame for love as lovers kind, say, can ye minister to deceased mind?" This much concerning Badr al-Din Hassan and Sit al-Hassan. he entered the privy, where he found that oh my goodness, wait a minute everybody, I have to change my pages around. I do apologise. And there I was thinking it had turned to page 28. My goodness. I hope you're all sitting comfortably. And this much concerning Badr al-Din Hassan and Sitin al-San, his cousin. But as regards the Ifrit, as soon as he saw the twain asleep, he said to the Ifritah, "Arise, slip thee under the youth, and let us carry him back to his place ere dawn overtake us, for the day is near hand." Thereupon she came forward, and getting under him as he lay asleep, took him up, and clad only in his fine blue shirt, leaving the rest of his garments, and ceased not flying, and the Ifrit vying her with her in fight, till the dawn advised them that it had come upon them midway, and the Muezzin began his call from the minaret. "Haste yet ye to salvation, haste ye to salvation." Then Allah suffered his angelic host to shoot down the Ifrit with a shooting star, so he was consumed. But the Ifritah escaped, and she descended with Badr al-Din at the place where the Ifrit was burnt, and did not carry him back to Basra, fearing lest he come to harm. Now, by the order of him who predestineth all things, they alighted at Damascus of Syria, and the Ifritah set down her burden at one of the city gates and flew away. When day arose and the doors were opened, the folk who came forth saw a handsome youth with no raiment but his blue shirt of gold-embroidered silk and skull-cap, lying upon the ground, drowned in sleep after the hard labour of the night, which had not suffered him to take his rest. So the folk looking upon him said, "Oh, her luck with whom this one spent the night, but would he had waited to don his garments." Quoth another, "A sorry lot are the sons of great families. Haply he but now came forth of the tavern on some occasion of his own, and his wine flew to his head, whereby he have missed the place he was making for, and strayed till he came to the gate of the city, and finding it shut, lay him down and went to bye-bye." As the people were bandying guesses about him, suddenly the morning breeze blew upon Badr al-Din, and raising his shirt to his middle, showed a stomach and navel with something below it, and legs and thighs clear as crystal and smooth as cream. Cried the people, "By Allah, this is a pretty fellow." And at that cry, Badr al-Din awoke and found himself lying at a city gate with a crowd gathered around him. At this he greatly marvelled and asked, "Where am I, O good folk, and what causeth you thus to gather round me, and what have I had to do with you?" And they answered, "We found thee lying here asleep during the call to dawn prayer, and this all we know of the matter. But where didst thou lie last night?" "By Allah, O good people," replied he, "I lay last night in Cairo." Said somebody, "Thou hast surely been eating hashish." And another, "He is a fool." And a third, "He is a true idiot." And a fourth asked him, "Art thou out of thy mind? Thou sleepest in Cairo, and thou wakest in the morning at the gate of Damascus city." Cried he, "By Allah, my good people, one and all, I lie not to you. Indeed, I lay yesternight in the land of Egypt, and yesternoon I was in Bassorah. Quoth one, well, well. Quoth another, ho, ho. And a third, so, so. And a fourth cried, this youth is mad and possessed of the jinni. And so they clapped hands at him and said to one another, alas, the pity of it for this youth. By Allah, a madman, and madness is no respecter of persons. Then they said to him, collect thy wits and return to thy reason. How couldst thou be in Bassorah yesterday and in Cairo yesternight, and withal awake in Damascus this morning? But he persisted. Indeed, I was a bridegroom in Cairo last night. Belike thou hast been dreaming, rejoined they, and sawest all this in thy sleep. So Hassan took thought for a while and said to them, by Allah, this is no dream, nor vision like doth it seem. I certainly was in Cairo, where they displayed the bride before me in presence of a third person, the hunchback groom who was sitting hard by. By Allah, O my brother, this be no dream. And if it were a dream, where is the bag of gold I bore with me, and where are my turband and my rose and my trousers? Thus he arose and entered the city, threading its highways and byways and bazaar streets, and the people pressed upon him and jeered at him, crying, mad, mad, madman, till he, beside himself with rage, took refuge in a cook's shop. And excuse me, I need a drink. We're on page 26, everybody. 2 more pages to go. Now, that cook had been a trifle too clever, that is, a rogue and a thief. But Allah had made him repent and turn from his evil ways and open a cook shop. And all the people of Damascus stood in fear of his boldness and his mischief. So when the crowd saw the youth enter his shop, they dispersed, being afraid of him, and went their ways. The cook looked at Badr al-Din, and noting his beauty and loveliness, fell in love with him forthright, and said, whence comest thou, O youth? Tell me at once thy tale, for thou art become dearer to me than my soul. So Hassan recounted to him all that had befallen him, from beginning to end. But in repetition, there is no fruition. That's a great one, isn't it? But in repetition, there is no fruition. And the cook said, O my lord, Badr al-Din, doubtless thou knowest that this case is wondrous and this story marvellous. Therefore, O my son, hide what hath betided thee, till Allah dispel what ills be thine, and tarry with me here the meanwhile, for I have no child, and will adopt thee. Badr al-Din replied, be it as thou wilt, O my uncle. Whereupon the cook went to the bazaar and bought him a fine suit of clothes and made him don it. Then fared with him to the Qazi and formally declared that he was his son. So Badr al-Din Hassan became known in Damascus city as the cook's son, and he sat with him in the shop to take the silver. And on this wise he sojourned there for a time. Thus far concerning him. But as regards his cousin, the Lady of Beauty, when morning dawned, she awoke and missed Badr al-Din Hassan from her side. But she thought that he had gone to the privy, and she sat expecting him for an hour or so, when behold, entered her father Shams al-Din Muhammad Wazir of Egypt. Now he was disconsolate by the reason of what had befallen him through the Sultan, who had entreated him harshly and had married his daughter by force to the lowest of his menials and to a lump of a groom bunchbacked withal. And he said to himself, I will slay this daughter of mine, if of her own free will she have yielded her person to this accursed Kyle. So he came to the door of the bride's private chamber and said, Ho, ho, sit, Halsun. And she answered, Here am I, O my lord, and came out, unsteady of gait, after the pains and pleasures of the night. And she kissed his hand, and her face showing redoubled brightness and beauty for having lain in the arms of that gazelle, her cousin. When her father, the wazir, saw her in such case, he asked her, O thou accursed, art thou rejoicing because of this horse groom? And Sid al-Hasan smiled sweetly and answered, By Allah, don't ridicule me. Enough of what passed yesterday when folk laughed at me, and even with me, with that groom fellow who is not worthy to bring my husband's shoes or slippers. Nay, who is not worth the paring of my husband's nails? By the Lord, never in my life have I nighted a night so sweet as yesternight, so don't mock my reminding me of the Gobo. When her parent heard her words, he was filled with fury, and his eyes glared and stared, so that little of them showed save the whites, and he cried, Fie upon thee! What words are these? 'Twas the hunchbacked horse-groom who passed the night with thee. Allah upon thee, replied the lady of beauty, dissuaded and went his way. As for me, I entered the bridal chamber, where I found my bridegroom sitting after the singer women had displayed him to me, the same who had crossed their hands with red gold, till every pauper that was present waxed wealthy. And I passed the night on the breast of my bonny man, a most lively darling, with his black eyes and joined eyebrows. When her parent heard the words, the light before his face became night, and he cried out at her, saying, O thou whore, what is this that thou tellest me? Where be thy wits? O my father, she rejoined, thou breakest my heart. Enough for thee that thou hast been so hard upon me. Indeed, my husband, who took my virginity, is but just now gone to the draught house, and I feel that I have conceived by him. The wazir rose in much marvel, and entered the privy, where he found the hunchbacked horse-groom, with his head in the hole and his heels in the air. At this sight he was confounded, and said, This is none other than he, the rascal hunchback. So he called to him, Ho, hunchback! And the Gobo grunted, thinking it was the Ifrit who spoke to him. So the wazir shouted at him and said, Speak out, or I shall strike out thy pate with this sword. Then quoth the hunchback, By Allah, O Sheikh of the Ifrits, ever since thou settest me in this place, I have not lifted my head. So Allah upon thee take pity and entreat me kindly. When the wazir heard this, he asked, What is this thou sayest? I am the bride's father, and no Ifrit. Enough for thee that thou hast well nigh done me die, answered the Quasimodo. Now go by thy ways, before he come upon thee who hath served me thus. Could ye not marry me to any save the lady love of buffaloes and the beloved of Ifrits? Allah curse her, and curse him who married me to her, and was the cause of this my case. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased to say her permitted say. So, dear friends, that was it the 22nd night? I'm just going to check now. Look at the very last page. Indeed, that was the 22nd night of 1001 Arabian Nights. I'm hot and I'm exhausted. That was 13 pages of full-on reading. I hope you enjoyed it very much. The candles have almost burnt low by now. My tea will be getting cold. Oh, hi, Dill John. How lovely to see you. I hope you enjoyed this evening's read. Tomorrow, Saman has said she will be joining us, lucky us, and reading us the 23rd night. Once again, if you want to listen to Robert Pym reading from his Hostel stories, they were very funny and they are still online, his videos, and also something for the children yesterday, which I read, which was an awful lot of fun. 2 British stories, one very well known and one lesser known story. It was, as usual, an absolute pleasure reading for you this evening. Thanks, Anita. I love doing it too. I really am totally exhausted. I feel like I need a stiff drink after this one. It was a really great read tonight, although I have to say, I don't know whether you noticed, but he went in 15 times and she conceived. I had to have a little grin at that one. So it was a very short, sweet affair that they had with each other, if you counted it. Yes, well, let us see. But I did have to laugh at that one. But at least they had a good time and she fell deeply in love and he was very beautiful. The question is, what is going to happen to that poor girl now? Because the father has threatened to kill her because he thinks that she has spent the night with the very ugly horse groom that she was supposed to marry because the Sultan said it should be so. So that's going to be, I know, right, Tim? If only it was always that easy. Really, can you imagine? Anyway, so it's going to be really interesting to find out what happened to that poor girl tomorrow evening. Now, if any of the other 21 nights are to go by, the future of these women has never fared very well. But we can always live in hope that this time she's going to live and find her one true love, who at the moment is whiling his time away in a cook shop in Damascus, fully dressed luckily by now. And I had an absolute joy at the pleasure the people outside the gates of Damascus had when he was lying there only in his blue silk shirt, and the winds blew said silk shirt. I don't know if you noticed this or if you were, how adamantly you were listening in, when they blew up, when the wind blew up the blue silk shirt, and they remarked how beautiful he was. Hi, Bronwyn. So I had to have a little inner sense of joy and giggle and pleasure at that one. And I can only say, if he was so beautiful, that all the people standing outside, hi Jane, all the people from Damascus who were standing at the gate, and if you can imagine, it was the morning gate, so it would have been an awful hundreds of people, if not thousands of people, standing outside the gates of Damascus, waiting to get into the city so they could spend the day in the markets, selling their wares and telling stories and charming snakes and doing whatever they would have to do. Then you can imagine that as a bunch of people seeing his private parts underneath that blue silk, right? Thank you so much for all the loves and the likes. So it was, thank you, Saman, thank you for your kind words. So there was a lot of fun. There's a lot of things to giggle at and have a lot of fun with in today's story. So it is oh my goodness, it's 11:15. So I've been on for a whole hour. I'm going to have to go and stand outside in the cool air for a little bit and cool myself off after the pure heat, the pure romance of that. It was a little bit like a Hollywood sex scene, actually, wasn't it? Because they always happen really, really fast too. Like the whole thing happens in like 30 seconds or something, and then suddenly it's the next day and everyone's happy and had children, as you do. It's so easy. So everybody, you are going to love listening to Saman tomorrow evening. She always has such a beautiful, beautiful voice, and it was a real pleasure as usual. And I got to get offline actually, because I've got to speak to somebody who really wants to read for you guys, and he's been trying to get hold of me for the past 2 days, and I keep missing his phone call, and he called me like 10 minutes before I was due to go on, and I quickly typed and I was like, I'm really sorry, I'll call you as soon as I finish the reading. So we're going to have somebody new and exciting reading for us very, very soon, I hope. So wish me luck. Bye-bye, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Take care. See you tomorrow. From me out here in the 23rd district and my glass of wine, wishing you much love, much joy. Take care of yourself. Kisses. Watch out for those ifrits, because most of the time they don't mean good things. If you come across one, run a mile. Okay? Take care, everybody. Good night. See you.